Princess Zaraketh of the Draxian Dominion sat in the strategic command chamber, her silver scales reflecting the holographic displays that showed the impending disaster. Around her, the Empire's finest military minds argued, proposed, and ultimately admitted they had no solution. The Vorelian armada will reach our borders in 6 days, General Thexver stated grimly. They outnumber our fleet 3-1. They have superior shielding technology. Every simulation shows the same result: total defeat within 48 hours of engagement. Then we negotiate surrender, suggested Chancellor Vorakin. Better to maintain some autonomy under Vorelian rule than we do not surrender, Zaraketh hissed, her voice carrying the royal harmonics that made every Draxian in the room straighten reflexively. My mother did not build this empire across 3 generations for us to simply hand it to the Vorelians because they have more ships. With respect, Your Highness, General Thexver said carefully, what alternative do you propose? We cannot manufacture additional ships in 6 days. We cannot develop new weapons. We cannot recruit and train new soldiers. The mathematics are insurmountable. From the back of the chamber, a voice spoke in accented Draxian. Actually, you can do all 3, just not the way you're thinking. Every head turned to stare at James Morrison, the human who sat in the consort's chair, a seat traditionally reserved for the spouse of a royal but rarely occupied, and certainly never spoken from during military councils. Zaraketh felt her spinal ridges stiffen with embarrassment. She'd married James 6 months ago as part of the treaty that brought Earth into the Draxian sphere of influence. The marriage was purely political. Humans controlled strategic jump points, and the alliance benefited both parties. James was pleasant enough, but he was human. Soft-skinned, short-lived from a species barely a century into space travel, he had no business speaking in a military council. The consort will remain silent, Chancellor Vorakin said dismissively. These matters are beyond. Let him speak, Zaraketh heard herself say. She wasn't sure why, perhaps curiosity. Perhaps desperation. Perhaps something about the way James had been quietly observing the entire meeting, taking notes on that primitive datapad humans favored, his expression thoughtful rather than panicked. James stood, and Zaraketh was reminded again how different humans were from Draxians. Where her people were tall, scaled, and built for power, James was shorter, covered in soft skin built for... Well, she still wasn't entirely sure what humans were built for. They seemed fragile. Thank you, Your Highness, James said formally. I've been reviewing the tactical situation, and you're right, you can't win a conventional engagement. The Vorelians have numerical and technological superiority, but that's only relevant if you fight the battle they expect. And what battle would you have us fight? General Thexver asked, his tone making clear he was humoring the human only because the princess had allowed it. James activated his datapad and with permission gestures from Zaraketh linked it to the main display. On Earth we have a saying, if you find yourself in a fair fight, your tactics suck. You're trying to fight fair, fleet against fleet, shield against shield. Instead, fight dirty. The display showed the Vorelian fleet's approach vector. They're coming through the Keltharis corridor, the only viable route given the stellar geography. It's a natural choke point, but you're not using it as one. You're planning to meet them in open space beyond the corridor. The corridor itself is too narrow for fleet combat, Thexver objected. We'd be unable to maneuver sitting targets. Exactly, James interrupted. So don't fight in the corridor, fight with the corridor. He zoomed in on the corridor's structure, a region of space flanked by unstable stars and navigation hazards. The Vorelians chose this route because it's the safest approach. But safest is relative. Earth has something we call asymmetric warfare. When you can't match your enemy's strength, you change the battlefield to neutralize their advantages. James pulled up new data, mining operations, industrial facilities, cargo ships. You have 17 mining stations along the corridor. Each one has industrial explosives for asteroid processing. You have 43 cargo haulers currently in or near the corridor, and you have 6 days to turn all of that into the largest minefield in galactic history. The chamber erupted in overlapping objections, but Zaraketh raised her hand for silence, her eyes fixed on the display. Continue. Pack every cargo hauler with mining explosives. Position them at key points throughout the corridor disguised as normal traffic. When the Vorelian fleet enters, detonate them. Not to destroy the fleet, you won't, but to destabilize the corridor itself. Create debris fields, trigger stellar flares, make the safe route into a navigation nightmare. And then, Zaraketh asked, leaning forward now, seeing the shape of the strategy. Then you hit them with everything unconventional you have. Cyber attacks on their navigation systems while they're distracted. Drone swarms. You don't have many warships, but I noticed you have thousands of industrial drones. Retrofit them with kinetic weapons. One drone isn't a threat, but 10,000 drones swarming a disoriented fleet. That's a threat. Meanwhile, your actual warships attack from unexpected vectors using the chaos as cover. General Thexver was shaking his head. This is piracy tactics, guerrilla warfare, dishonorable. Effective, James corrected. On Earth, we've spent 10,000 years fighting each other. We got very good at it. Big armies usually beat small armies in fair fights, so small armies stopped fighting fair. They used terrain, deception, mobility, psychology. They made the enemy's strengths irrelevant and exploited their weaknesses. He looked around the chamber. The Vorelians are expecting a conventional battle. They've planned for it, trained for it, built their entire strategy around it. They're not prepared for you to turn their safe corridor into a death trap and then swarm them with weapons they didn't know existed. Chancellor Vorakin spoke up, his voice uncertain. Even if this works tactically, which I doubt, the political implications, using civilian cargo ships as weapons, the Galactic Convention, James said flatly, will be written by whoever wins. If the Vorelians conquer you, they'll write the history books and nobody will care about your honorable last stand. If you win, you'll be the cunning defenders who used ingenious tactics to overcome impossible odds. Zaraketh stood, her decision made. We implement the humans' plan. General Thexver, coordinate with Consort Morrison on tactical details. Chancellor, begin evacuating the mining stations and requisitioning cargo vessels. We have 6 days. The meeting dissolved into frantic planning. Zaraketh noticed that the initial skepticism toward James was fading as military officers realized the plan, while unconventional was actually viable. More than viable, it might actually work. Late that night, Zaraketh found James in their shared quarters, still working on tactical calculations. She'd been so focused on the political and diplomatic aspects of their marriage that she'd barely spent time with him beyond formal requirements. "Why did you help?" she asked directly. "This isn't your war. Earth is allied with us, yes, but the treaty doesn't obligate you to personal involvement in military planning. James looked up from his work. Because you're my wife. I know it's political, I know we barely know each other, but that still means something to me. Humans take marriage seriously, even arranged ones. You barely know our military, our technology, our capabilities. How did you develop that strategy so quickly? James smiled. That peculiar human expression that showed teeth but indicated friendliness rather than aggression. I know human military history. Turns out the basics don't change much. Numbers, technology, terrain, morale, surprise, deception. Those factors matter whether you're fighting with bronze swords or plasma cannons. The Vorelians have better numbers and technology, so we use terrain, surprise, and deception to balance the equation. And if it fails, if the Vorelians defeat us anyway, then we tried something, James replied. Better than just accepting defeat. Besides, I've got a few more tricks if this doesn't work. Humans are really creative when it comes to warfare. It's kind of our thing. Over the next 6 days, Zaraketh watched in fascination as James worked with her military command to implement the strategy. His suggestions were constantly surprising, drawing from Earth historical battles she'd never heard of, applying lessons from conflicts fought with primitive weapons to modern space warfare. The Battle of Thermopylae, James explained during one planning session. 300 Spartans held off a Persian army of hundreds of thousands by using a narrow mountain pass. The Persians couldn't use their numbers effectively. We're doing the same thing in the Keltharis corridor. The Tet Offensive, he noted while planning the timing. North Vietnamese forces attacked during a holiday when their enemies were relaxed and celebrating. Psychological impact multiplied the military effect. We should time our initial explosions to coincide with the shift change in Vorelian fleet operations, maximum confusion. The Trojan horse, he suggested when discussing the cargo ships. Make them look like they're fleeing. The Vorelians will ignore panicking civilian vessels until those vessels explode. Zaraketh found herself spending more time with James, not just for military planning, but because she was genuinely interested in his perspective. He saw problems differently than any Draxian she'd known. Where her people valued honor, tradition, and direct confrontation, James valued adaptability, creativity, and winning by any means necessary. Is all human warfare this? Indirect? She asked one evening. The best of it, yeah, James replied. We're not the strongest species, we're not the fastest or toughest. But we're clever and we're stubborn, and we absolutely refuse to accept that something can't be done just because it looks impossible. Humans have won wars we had no business winning because we were willing to try crazy things that nobody expected. On the 6th day, the Vorelian armada entered the Keltharis corridor, and James's plan executed perfectly. The first cargo ship detonated 8 minutes into the fleet's transit, triggering a chain reaction of industrial explosives that turned a kilometer-wide section of the corridor into an expanding debris field. The Vorelians, suddenly facing unexpected hazards, broke formation to navigate around it. Then the second detonation, and the third, and the fourth. Within 30 minutes, the safe corridor was a navigational nightmare. Vorelian ships were scattered, their formations broken, their shields battered by debris impacts. Their advanced targeting systems struggled to distinguish between dangerous obstacles and empty space amid all the chaos. Then the drone swarms hit. Thousands of industrial drones, hastily retrofitted with kinetic weapons, swarmed the disorganized fleet. Individually, each drone was barely a nuisance. Collectively, they were overwhelming. Vorelian point defense systems, designed to stop missiles and fighters, were not optimized for dealing with thousands of small, maneuverable targets. While the Vorelians struggled with the drones, Draxian warships attacked from unexpected vectors, using the debris fields as cover. They didn't try to slug it out in direct combat. They hit hard, then retreated, then hit again from a different angle. And throughout all of it, Draxian cyber warfare units, guided by human techniques James had taught them, hacked into Vorelian communication systems, spreading false orders and confusion. The battle lasted 7 hours. When it ended, the Vorelian armada was in full retreat, having lost 40% of their capital ships and accomplished none of their objectives. The Draxian fleet had taken losses, but remained intact and functional. They'd won. The victory celebration in the royal palace was the most enthusiastic Zaraketh had ever witnessed. But she slipped away from the main festivities to find James, who was sitting alone on a balcony overlooking the capital city. "You should be celebrating," she said, joining him. "You saved the Empire." "I helped," James corrected. "Your people executed the plan brilliantly. I just provided some ideas. Ideas that none of us would have conceived. Ideas that came from human military history spanning thousands of years." Zaraketh sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "The court underestimated you, thought you were just a political convenience, a harmless alien from a primitive species." "And what do you think?" James asked. Zaraketh was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think humans are the most dangerous species I've ever encountered, not because you're strong, you're not compared to most galactic species, but because you're endlessly creative in finding ways to win. You don't accept defeat. You don't follow the rules. You find angles nobody else sees and exploit them with terrifying effectiveness." She turned to look at him directly. "I also think I underestimated you personally. I thought this marriage was purely political, that you'd be a pleasant companion but nothing more. I was wrong." "Yeah." James's expression was hopeful in a way that made Zaraketh's heart, or the Draxian equivalent, beat faster. "I want to know you better," she said. "Not as the human consort, not as a political ally, as James Morrison, as the person who saved my empire by thinking differently than anyone else could." James smiled, that genuine human smile that she was learning to recognize and appreciate. "I'd like that, and for what it's worth, I underestimated you too. I thought you were just going through the motions with this marriage, but you trusted me when your entire command staff thought I was crazy. You implemented a plan that went against every tradition your military had. That takes courage." "Or desperation," Zaraketh suggested. "No," James disagreed. "Desperate leaders make reckless decisions. You made a calculated risk. You saw the logic in the strategy even though it was alien to your thinking. That's not desperation. That's wisdom." Over the following months, Zaraketh and James grew closer. The political marriage transformed into something genuine as they learned to appreciate each other's strengths. James continued to advise on military and strategic matters, his human perspective providing insights that repeatedly caught enemies off guard. But more than that, Zaraketh found herself enjoying his company. His humor, his curiosity, his willingness to question assumptions. The way he saw possibilities where others saw limitations. 1 year after the Battle of Keltharis Corridor, as it came to be known, the Draxian Dominion had become the most dynamic power in the sector. Not through conquest, but through adopting human-style thinking, adaptability, creativity, asymmetric advantages. And at the center of it all was James Morrison, the human consort whom everyone had underestimated. "Do you miss Earth?" Zaraketh asked him one evening as they reviewed reports from the frontier worlds. "Sometimes," James admitted. "But I'm building something here. With you, a future that combines the best of Draxian strength and human creativity. That's worth staying for." Zaraketh took his hand, a human gesture she'd learned. "My council no longer underestimates you. My military actively seeks your advice. My people see you as a hero." "And you?" James asked. "What do you see?" Zaraketh's scales shifted color, displaying emotions she'd never expected to feel for an arranged spouse from an alien species. "I see my partner, my advisor, my friend, and yes, if I'm being honest, the person I've fallen in love with." James's smile was radiant. "Good, because I fell in love with you somewhere between Implement the Humans' plan and we won the impossible battle. You're brilliant, Zaraketh. You were willing to change your entire military doctrine based on advice from a species you barely knew. That's remarkable." "I learned from the best," Zaraketh replied. "You taught me that strength comes in many forms. That unconventional thinking can overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. That sometimes the best strategy is the one nobody expects." She pulled him closer. "They all underestimated the human consort. I don't anymore. I see you for what you are, the most dangerous and valuable asset my empire has ever had." "Dangerous and valuable," James laughed. "I'll take it." "And loved," Zaraketh added softly. "Most importantly, loved." As they stood together looking over the empire they were building together, neither of them could have predicted how profoundly one human's creative thinking would reshape Draxian civilization. But both of them knew one truth with certainty. Never underestimate someone just because they think differently. Sometimes different thinking is exactly what you need.